questions before we I start talking about any of these things? I have only 4 or 5 slides, so I'm not, probably I'm going to talk more. The first question we are going to ask is, why do we need a nervous system?
Sorry?
Why do we need a nervous system? Sorry? From where to where? He's halfway through, right? Naturally, but you can remember we call them brain dead, right? They still survive, right? So it's not that simple. What else? Not necessarily. Again, brain dead you can be okay about with some amount of functions. That is all functions. I'm not denying that's the function of your nervous system. I'm just saying that is not the important thing. So, because if you understand that, then only you will understand the models of brain. Yeah, you're halfway right. Again, he is halfway right. So, he said information from brain to the body, right? Right. There is something about information, there is about action. So, combine all these things and tell me what. Sorry? You don't need to plan, you just have to do things.
Communicate with
You want to communicate with who?
meeting systems. Like internal systems.
Internal system? Not really. That might be one of the functions, but what is the primary value of. Remember the smaller organisms like the bacteria, right? They don't have a nervous system, right? You understand that? So they also survive, right? They also live. They are also defined as living organisms. So what is the function of the nervous system?
I think we have different nervous system, different areas.
I understand that, but as a philosophical idea, what is the value of a nervous system? We are assuming that, say for example, the garden lizard may not have conscious, right? We don't know, but we can assume that it is not as conscious as us, right? Sorry? Exactly, we need to understand the environment. So information about the environment is why you have the brain. If you understand the information about the environment, then you can do goal-directed action. Am I understood? How does your bacteria move towards a place where there is an infection or something like that? They just move randomly, right? And when they think that that is the right path, they just keep on moving. But for us, if I know that there is food there, I can go there also. So if you have a nervous system, your understanding of the environment becomes far more superior, and then you can make your system can be focused towards attaining something, whether it is going towards food or shelter or all the Maslow's lower level things, right? So when you are trying to understand that this information is collected so that I have to move, I have to do things, then you will understand why that information does not have to be correct. He was giving you some information where you are not seeing half of it, right? That is not the job of your nervous system. To see everything is not why you have eyes. Your eyes are not a camera. The camera sees everything, but your eyes don't. They don't have to. They have to see only one thing. What they have to see? No, you don't focus on anything. Your eyes focus for you, and you don't have conscious about where to focus.
What required?
What is required to do what? Some information again which helps you in not getting hurt or going towards some task or again any focused activity. Am I understood? So what is the activity he told you to see? How many times the white person? So the brain does not care about the other things. It doesn't need to know about those things. Am I understood? Now if you are driving your car, nobody sees the number plate of the front, the car in the front, right? What do we see? Mostly the indicator, right? Because or the brakes and things like that. Went to Bangalore and it was just a go-kart race. Those people are just horrendous drivers. They turn from here to here, and this guy was like, yeah, go. I don't know why. I thought in our place they will chappals vinjiron vadival sonna mari nadandru, right? So we are trying to understand things which are valuable for us. So our nervous system is trying to collect information, and the information does not have to be true. The information has to be which are valuable for us. Am I understood? That's why if you have more colorful things, if you have women in the advertisement, everybody sees. That's why those people were neuroscientists far before what we understood, right? So we have some understanding of the brain works, but we have no understanding of many things. That is what I wanted to emphasize today, because a lot of people think that we understand the brain. We have a very little clue of how the brain works, right? Now the first thing you want to remember is a brain is a very energy expensive organ. Whatever, if you're eating 100 grams, 25 grams goes to your brain, and that too it should be in the form of sugar, right, carbohydrates. So it is very it has a lot of energy expenditure, right? Why it is important, you can go and think about it, because I'm going to leave a lot of things open today. So when you are awake, right, when you are awake, there is no off switch for your brain. You cannot like your computer, it doesn't go to sleep mode, or you cannot off the brain. So when you are awake, you are going to expend a lot of energy. When you are sleeping, you are going to have less energy expenditure. So probably you also need a you also need a certain amount of certain amount of understanding of the anatomy and physiology and things like that for us to. So you just go into a gross anatomy. Now when you are looking at the evolution of our organism, as I said, because we wanted to understand the environment more clearly, with far better understanding of the environment is for us, and we also one of the few species who can modify the environment according to us rather than the other way around also. There are other animals who does that, but not like us, right? Now, as I told you, understanding brain is fairly difficult to do. A lot of it is conjecture, and we just make up words also. But anyway, these are the three ways we understand brain. We will go into these things before understanding the model. The first is that is what was first used based on lesions. If one area is affected, then that function is not working, then we can think that, okay, that is the reason why, that is the function of that particular area, right? Then is activity in that region. You can measure the activity of that brain region, right? You can use two things. One is electroencephalogram. You can use to find that. It gives you gross idea, or you can put electrodes inside the brain itself. Remember, not in humans, but in animal models mostly, and you can manipulate it. Again, you can zap that area, that is, you can give electrical stimulation to that area and then see what happens to you, right? There are nowadays powerful magnets, what they call as transmagnetical stimulation or something like that, TMS I think. So you can actually keep that magnet here. If you are keeping it here, your motor area, and give a good zap, you can actually you will actually lift your legs or hands depending on where you have that also. Sometimes what they do is if they are going to have a complicated neurosurgery, they put electrodes inside the brain itself prior to the surgery, so that what areas can be removed, what areas cannot be removed. So they zap that also and try to find out what is the function of those things. So these are the three ways predominantly what they do. As I told you, activity nowadays they also use what we call as an fMRI, right? Functional magnetic resonance imaging, right? Remember, fMRI does not measure brain activity; it measures blood activities. Right? They what they call as BOLD signals, BOLD signals, right? It does not measure brain activity. It's a surrogate measure for your brain activity. That is, if there is more circulation to that area, there is more metabolism happening in that area, they are assuming that that region is the what is that function of that region, something like that, right? So all these things have its own advantages and disadvantages. Now when we are studying brain, we study it in two ways. One is at what he was talking about, the neurons and the synapse and what they call as the micro levels, and the next is we study it as the areas of the brain. So these are the micro level and macro level, if you right. So these are the two ways you can study. So I'll just give you some examples of how certain areas of the brain was. Now we understand some areas which are working for that. So the first area which was clearly mapped, or which was first hypothesized, was the Broca's area, what we call it as Broca, right? So if you go and read about that, you will see that there was a patient who was dubbed as Tan, because he could only utter two things. He was keeping on saying tan for everything. That is, he had a speech disorder, and they had done an autopsy and preserved that brain. And when Broca went and examined it after some time, he found the area which we now call as Broca's area to be affected, and he hypothesized that this is the area where we are producing speech. So he called it as the speech area. The other two people are the Fritz and Hitzig. These two people were they did a pioneering experiment. Nowadays you can't do this experiment ever. There is no chance. So what they did was they restrained a dog. Restraint means that it cannot move much. So they tied it up, opened the skull, no anesthesia. So that's why I'm telling you this cannot be done ever after. They opened the skull, and that was the time when they have started they have developed what we call as galvanic current now. So people are playing with galvanic current, and then they zap areas in the brain. And so these two people were the first to mark what we call it as the sensory motor area, right? So what it tells you is, Saravanan was telling that there are areas which are specific, and also it is also distributed. So we think that the brain is in two ways. One is modular and distributed. What do I mean by modular is a particular place is working for that particular function. Say for example, the temporoparietal region, junction they call it as, they have a modular region for probably for the theory of the mind. And we also know that Broca's area, Wernicke's area, and some amount of we have one of the modular areas is your sensory motor cortex. We have those things. So they are modular, but they alone don't do that, right? They alone don't do that. They all are distributed. All the they are connected in different manners to other parts of the brain, and they also influence them. Then only you get a movement. Am I clear? So your brain can be considered as modular, but at the same time you have to understand it is distributed. Am I clear? Modular means that one place, one function, one area, one function, but distributed. Nowadays people think that you have to think brain as a distributed system rather than just a modular system, right? Again, how did they found out that this is the Wernicke area, this is where you have theory of mind, or this is where you know that when an object is moving, this is the area in your visual cortex which works. All these things, as I told you, you can use these three methods and try to find out whether they had a lesion there, or whether they can zap that area, or they can do fMRI. If all three things are correlating, all three methods you are trying it and you are finding it out, then you can, some amount of confidence you can say these areas seems to be the function of this, right? He also was talking about the fusicular area, right? That is the area where they think that you recognize faces. You just you know, this is this person, this is this person. How do I know that? There are hundreds of people in that. I know that this is my mother, this is my father from. So there is an area for just the faces alone. Now they found out with correlation with fMRI, and then they had a patient in Japan where he had electrodes in his brain, again for surgery, and they zapped that area, the fusicular part of the cortex, and when they show him a cardboard, and when they zap him, he could see face in that. Not clearly what face or something like that, but he could say that he was saying that there is a face there and things like that. So they have with some amount of confidence, they can say that this area is for face recognition. I think Nancy, I don't know the second name, she was the one who found that. Probably might get Nobel Prize in the next 10 years before she dies. Now, this is where I am going to tell you why we don't have a slightest clue how the brain works. So these are some of the words they have done it in a paper to say that if they say motor area, what they say is this determines your movement. This area determines your movement. Or they say that this area regulates your emotions, right? These are all placeholders. What do I mean by placeholders? It is, we don't know what this means. We just think that these areas are doing something to produce that. We don't know what that something is. For that we use all these words. Am I understood? This is where we are not sure whether how the brain works. How this facial area, right? I said if you stimulate it, it gives you a face, but we don't know how it recognizes the face, right? We just know that it is somehow related to the face, but we don't know the exact the cause and effect pathway. All right, so they have somehow have found out all the words which they use to tell you that this is these are the things which usually is used, right? As he was talking about emergence, so we think that the emergence is again it's a placeholder for not knowing also. So hard emergence basically tells you that we don't know how this substrate emerges into a movement or a phase or a word or a sentence. How it does, we are not sure, right? The next thing you want to understand is your brain is not what they call it as an empty slate. You are not born without anything. You understand a lot of things, especially a lot of physics you understand when you are born, right? That is, you know that it goes down. Children don't know that, it seems. Even 6 months or 7 months they understand. And there are a lot of beautiful videos for all these things. You can go and see how they find out. If you have children also, you can try it out in your home to see whether this is true also. The experiments are fairly benign, nothing to worry. Say for example, if you have some object in your hand, and if you do that and the object is vanishing, the children understand that it should not vanish, because it is not physically possible for us that to something to vanish. Only when you become older, you become an idiot and you think that that is magic, right? But when you are a child, you are actually very clear that cannot happen. A lot of things cannot happen. So you are not born with an empty slate. There are a lot of things which are imbibed in you. That is where you want to understand that your brain is to function in your environment. So you need to understand about the environment. That is, the things fall down, or things move in a particular direction, or things does not appear here and there like that. So you are embedded with all these information when you are born, right? Again, embedded is a word they always use. That is, your brain has these things when you are already there. Again, we don't have the slightest clue how those things happen, but we know that we are embedded with all those things. Am I clear? I don't know, where are the other slides? I think he opened the older one itself, I think. Anyway, okay, here it is. So these are the two models of brain. One is, this is what is commonly used, and I also use that in my book also, right? How does your movement emerge, right? So what are the things which are the base particles which make the movement, or your speech, or your thinking, all these things, behavior, all these things emerge from the interaction of three things. One is your environment, the organism, and the function you want to do, right? So when you are sitting like this, the movement emerges depending on the chair and where you want to see, what you want to do, right? So you can see this, that when you are sitting in this side, you are turned your head this way, and you are sitting this side, you are turning your head this way. The movement emerges depending on where you want to see. And also, if you are in a smaller chair, down, or your movements of your legs and things like that are different, again based on the environment. So that is the first model. The second model is mostly that is used in an embodied cognition, or embodied model of the brain. That is, the whole thing is, your body is inside a planet, right? You are inside the environment. So the environment determines how your body should be, and the body determines how your brain should be. Am I clear? So if you are, say for example, if you were born 1 million years ago, right? What are the most important skills you should have had? Hunting and gathering, right? Finding shelter, surviving, right? But now what is the most important function you want, or what is the most important thing you need is your phone, right? You can do anything with your phone, right? From eating to going anywhere, right? So a lot of people are in embodied system also, they think that your brain or your phone is your extended brain. You don't have to remember everything, right? When we were small, if you have to go to somebody's house, the first thing you want to know is how to go, the places. Now you don't need anything because you have your extended brain, that is your phone. So in the embodied brain, they think that your environment determines what your body should do and what your brain should do. Right? So these are the two models of which you can have. Now, what is the what does it mean? Again, you can use both the philosophical ideas in pain management or in stroke management. Again, we will look into it later on, but we'll just have a simple understanding of those things, right? And the next point, Saranan was telling that sometimes the stimulus has to go down, go from outside to inside and then come from, right, from the up to the down, and sometimes this way, right?
Down.
You can see in the embodied model, what they assume is because the environment has already told you that this is what is happening, you always start from the up to downwards. They will call it as a sort of a predictive model. Already the system starts doing it. Afterwards, this information about the environment comes, that acts as a feedback, and you do error correction. Am I understood? I start doing it, I start turning the bike before understanding the whole thing, and then I do an error correction rather than falling, or whether I have done a very acute turn or things like that. Right? So that's what that side of model makes us assume that there are a lot of prediction in that, there are a lot of embodied cognition in your brain. The common example I tell is Freudenschauder or word in German. It's a wonderful word. It means தமிழ்ல சொன்னா நீட்டமா தான் சொல்லணும், ஒரே வார்த்தையில சொல்ல முடியாது. அடுத்தவங்க கஷ்டப்பட்டா நம்மளுக்கு சந்தோஷமா இருக்கிறது தான் வந்து Freudenschauder. Right? We don't have a word for that, right? I don't know. Probably the other way around. Schadenfreude, whatever. German are wonderful people. They move less, they kill more, and they don't show emotion. Now, what does it tell you is, I think if you understand that word, you understand that emotion. That is, your emotion is embedded in you. When you were small, you learned that word, and that emotion gets embedded in you. And you know that if somebody is suffering, you can think that, okay, I should not be happy, or you can think, I'm happy, and you can think about that word. So the language also embeds a lot of your cognition in you. Again, that the language is part and parcel of your environment. So that is that model, and the other model is we are all interacting with each other and we get a movement or behavior. Right? Now, this is the model of it. Nowadays, when it comes to I'll just give you glimpses of certain things so that we can have some understanding. So this is a sort of a simple understanding of what I mean by connecting many things and dynamic activity. Now, if you think that A1 is a brain area, that is the speech area. So it produces a speech. And the Wernicke area is your language area. So that produces your language, that kind of modular thinking that this goes to this and this. Now, the problem is all our brains are associated, lot of regions are associated. The whole of your visual cortex is a lot of places for movements, colors, this and that, and so all these things are associated. What I mean by associated is if one area is affected, the other may not work properly. Say for example, there is an area for nouns, there seems to be area for verbs. So sometimes they are all associated, they are working together. Then this kind of happens, where one area is doing three functions. More importantly, this is what seems to be happening. There are many areas and they all interact together in a complicated manner to produce a movement. Right? So this is what they are using nowadays, what we call as a network theory. Don't ask me, is this is the best theory? Probably not, but this is the best theory now they have. Why they use this network theory is because the chatbot and things like that, they also use that network theory and they seem to be able to mimic what our brain is doing. So the network theory seems to be the best thing to do. Network theory is fairly complicated for me at least, because there is a lot of graph theories. I understand graph theory to a certain extent, but fairly difficult because I studied mathematics after 86. I have not studied mathematics. You all think that 86 is very old. So there are a lot of difficulties in for me, but they use graph theories where they use hubs and things like that, edges, and it's easy. It can read without graph theory also. That is, if you have basic understanding like what I have with graph theory also, but that is how they are using. So basic understanding of that is something like this. You can see that like in the graphs we used to draw, you can see that they have connected these two, and this is connected here, and these. So you'll have small connections and large connections. Small connections between areas surrounding it, and larger connections. Remember, you want smaller connections to have a faster response, but at the same time you also want a larger connections because you want to connect. This is a very small or a simple graphical representation, because you'll have lots and lots of things going in and out. I'm just putting a simple example to understand what they mean by graph. You can see the graph theory very clearly if you see flight patterns. You can see there are from Madras there are hundreds of flights gets out, and then some of them land in Dubai, some of them in Berlin or some place, and then some of them. So after that, from that they all go to US or something like that. So each will be called as hub. That is, it starts at Madras will be a hub, and Dubai will be a hub, and then German you will have Lufthansa. They stop at where do they stop in German? I don't think in Berlin, but anyway. So these kind of things they will Frankfurt, I think. So these things they will call it a hub. You can have similar things like this here also. So they are trying to understand these networks. Remember, most of the networks what we are using nowadays is not necessarily from the human brain. A lot of studies have been done in monkeys, and then only you can see the connections. One of the biggest connection you can see is your hospital connection. You can see with your just your anatomy. You can just open your brain and see with your naked eyes, and also the central connection between the two corpus callosum. You can see when you open the brain itself, but other connections are very small to understand. So they are trying to understand those things. They call that as the connectome, and this is the simplest connectome for what they call as the default network. Again, lot of this is not necessarily true, but it's just a sort of a gross understanding of how the connection happens, right? As I told you, a lot of things we have no idea how the brain works. Right. So these are some of the things you want to understand when you are trying to understand the brain. Now I'll just give you a simple example of what is a network. There are 7 networks which have been sort of confirmed, or they keep on studying. One of the easiest network we already know is the sensory motor network. We know that network, right? It goes from sensory, then the cortex, the pyramidal tracts, and things like that. But it is far more complicated, but we have a simple understanding of that network, right? So if you put somebody in the fMRI and ask them not to do anything, they just have to do whatever they think, just daydreaming, or there is no task at all. These are the areas which will be activated, right? So what they have found in probably it was in the 95, I think. They started this idea of what they call as default network. That is, if you are just doing nothing, you are thinking about yourself, you are thinking, daydreaming, all these things you are doing, these areas will be activated. Again, it means they are correlated. When you are dreaming and things like that, doing some sort of memory recollection, all these things, these areas seems to be working together, and they call it as the default network. It has its own advantages and disadvantages looking at it like this, because one of the problems is all these things are also connected by the same blood vessels. So the bold signal can also be because of the blood vessels are all working together rather than just the neurons. But they also have seen it in PET scans also, there is some amount of these activities seems to happening. So probably there is a network called as default network. So there are a lot of other networks. We will see them and try to understand how these things can be used. Now, what is the value of understanding it as a distributed system? As I told you, when you are thinking of pain, pain is not going to be understood in only one area of your brain. It's going to be distributed in many areas, and they all are going to be combined. That's why the environment and all these things are important. The context is important. When your brain will allow you to focus on the brain, when it is going to focus on other things, these are the things which you have to go and connect. We were doing an experiment of passing the ball. That is not of any value to us, right? But what is your patient always concentrating on? The pain, right? He is always thinking about the pain. He is not seeing the other things which is happening nearby him, right? Or to the other parts of the body. How can I change that? Right? So that is what you want to go and think about those things and find out how to use these physiological ideas into your practice. Right? This time we are not going to give you solutions, I suppose. Right? So that's it for today's introduction to the brain. If you have any questions, we will try to answer in another 5-10 minutes and then we finish. Sorry? No, we will have after 1 month or something.